The stage is our therapy. The stage is our let go. It's what I do.
Once the pandemic hit, I decided to come to New York City. Performing is not just for finances, it's also like a passion of mine.
Not having that feedback of an audience in front of you has been just crazy.
Welcome to Prime Latino Media Salon. I'm Theo Louis, and I've got three wonderful New York City artists who are currently premiering on the second episode of the series on PBS locally here through WNET, their All Arts channel. Starts this Monday at 7 p.m., but it's going to be playing for weeks, months. The series is called From Performers to Spectators, COVID-19 NYC, and it's about how artists, performing artists, were impacted by COVID when everything shut down in New York City back in March 2020. 18 artists were interviewed in total, but here we have three special ones that we're devoting the second episode to. And I'm so happy to have you here. I have Storm Marrero, I have Aaron Kisslinger, and I also have Gilberto Gabriel. And, I couldn't be more honored to have you share a couple of words of what you really experienced, how the experience was in being in the show, and how you're doing now as we're hopefully going from a pandemia to an endemia. So normally I start ladies first, but I'm going to keep you as the good sandwich filling in the middle. I'm going to start off with you, Aaron. You were hit just like everybody else as a performing artist. Aaron Kisslinger plays brass instruments. He's most known for doing that. My list is trombone, trumpet, tuba, and he sings. And you ended up, when the pandemic struck, I really want to start off with what people don't realize with our artists, performing artists, that your livelihood was impacted. How did that affect you holistically when everything was shut down in New York City and we were all scared for our lives as over 35,000 people died?
Practically the fear of the illness itself is one thing that we've all experienced, that we've all been moving through that together. But also the priority shifting of what it means, what our understanding of communal survival looks like, what our definitions of ourself. As an artist, so much of who you are becomes defined by what you do and what you create, and so having to break that paradigm and define yourself, figure out new ways to define yourself. You could watch the episode if you want to hear more. I'm sure we all talk about it more, but I think that the constant challenge of redefining oneself and one's understanding of self, it's not stopping, as the pandemic continues to evolve, and every time it feels like you get back on your feet, there's another variant, there's another surge, there's constant variables that we have to be adapting to. But also in some ways I feel like, there have been many different hidden blessings in terms of the collaboration, the community that's come out of it, the ways. I ended up on the show because I was playing on the street at Union Square, and Melissa saw me, and I'm a firm believer in serendipity. Serendipity is a guiding principle in my life, and so I'm like, she brought me on. It was a moment where it was like, not in a pandemic, I probably would not have been out there, but because.
But wasn't it shortly around that, which again, I'm sure you were going cuckoo out of your head. You even ended up going back home to live with your parents in Riverdale. Is that correct?
Yeah, I had been living with them in the Bronx at the beginning of the pandemic, and then I had kind of been bouncing around for a bunch.
But how was that? Like, at one point, I saw that there you are in Union Square, you're playing one of your brass instruments, but it was still there. So did you just have to go feed your passion and go out there? Or, in regard to the risk factor, what was it that had you hit the streets while we were still in the middle of the pandemic?
What had me hit the streets literally was the uprising in 2020. was the swell of protest that was
Of,
happening, and the
on the murder of George Floyd
right,
and the
and
social
the
unrest
protest
that ensued.
for Black liberation and abolition that ensued. And so I think the feeling that, oh, I have a direct thing that I can contribute to this movement, I think was something that was the first thing that drew me back out, and selfishly also just the need to be creating, a need to be in community, a need to be feeding off of that energy. I remember the feeling of playing in protests, and you know, since then, since I did that interview, my life looks drastically different. I'm now back. I'm being a full time musician. I'm gigging all the time. I'm working sound at venues. I have my own apartment. Like, my life looks completely different now than it did when I did that interview. But just, I think that's worth noting that things changed. But yeah, I mean, that there was the drive, there was a financial drive, but mostly it was a energetic communal drive, a survival mechanism. You know what I mean?
So it's interesting, Storm, one of our other artists of the 18 and the 6-part series, from performers to spectators, COVID-19, NYC, said that, when there was all this funding that was being made available, or just the safety nets we had for all, there was medical insurance if you weren't medically covered. But he said, no one ever cares about artists. There weren't really these provisions. So again, when your world stopped, where I think at that very moment, would you say that prior to COVID lockdown, had you reached one of the highest moments in your career? And how did that impact your livelihood?
Yeah. Um, there's this saying, when the pan is hot, I was sizzling, and life changed.
Yeah.
Life changed.
You were
I had just
MC
finished
at the Big
being the
Apple
MC.
Circus, weren't you?
I just finished in February 5th, no, February 2nd was the last day of Big Apple Circus, and then March 12th hit.
Right.
And in March 7th, I had just done my one-woman show at the Apollo Theater. And just days later, everything changed. And, we were all like, yeah, give it 2-3 weeks, give it a month, it's gonna change. And then when we realized it, no, 2 months, 4 months, 6 months in. And in that period of time, I was not only an artist prior to the pandemic, I was a caregiver. My mom was mid-stage dementia. So I'm doing dual roles of being a performer and being a caregiver. Once the pandemic hit, I just became a full-time caregiver. And it makes you question, like, my purpose changed. My purpose as an artist, as a musician, it changed into being a full-time caregiver for my mom, which I do not regret at all. But that's not what I do. It's not who I am. My release, my let go is the stage. And the stage allowed me to, like, release the tensions of being a caregiver. Seeing your parent deteriorate mentally and start forgetting people and start forgetting you. The stage was my therapy, and not being able to do that really did a number on the psyche, and yeah, and of course it messes with the ego, it messes with a lot of things, though,
Your
artists,
emotional
we have
state,
that
your
sense of
mental
ego,
state.
even if it's just a little bit. We want to put out an amazing show. We want to, our stage and the presence and the interaction with the audience. That was something so needed. Like, I did the whole IG thing, and it was horrible, and I loved it, but it was not the same as actually having human bodies interacting with you and seeing people's faces. It was very like,
Heartbreaking.
how do I, yeah.
This is Prime Latino Media Salon. I'm Theo Louis, and I want to piggyback on that with Gilberto, and I'm sure you can speak for the three. As artists, you feed off your audience. you had no audience for about a year, unless you were literally hitting the streets like Aaron and performing. But you know, you're a stage actor. You had done Guaracha, you know, at the Puerto Rican Traveling Theater, a wonderful Spanish language musical. You sing, you act, you dance, and now you have no audience. How was it? How badly did you miss your audience during that first year?
I miss them really, really bad. And it's true. You need that because it's a way to corroborate if you're doing the right thing or not. They are the ones that tell you what you need to fix, what is right, what you need to continue doing, what you need to stop doing. And as artists, we just want to continue to grow, right? And continue to grow and be the best version of ourselves. So I didn't have that meter. It took me weeks, I would say like 5 weeks to finally find something to do in which I could have that back. I started seeing people doing live shows on IG, like she said.
Instagram.
Yes,
Right.
Instagram, like Storm said. I started watching it on YouTube and Facebook, and I was like, maybe there's something here. Maybe I can do something. So I started researching, what can I do? What can I do? And I ended up watching this illustrator for children's book, whose name I don't remember. I think it's Mo something. And I saw that he just turned his camera on in his studio and he started drawing for kids and teaching them how to do simple cartoons.
At the height of the pandemic.
Yes. And I was like, that's a great idea. Maybe I can do something with this. And I'm also a visual artist, and I have a small Instagram with a small number of followers in which I just share my art. And I said, I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna do. Also, I couldn't sleep. I was going to sleep at 5, 6 a.m. and I wanted to be productive at night. So I invented this show called 6480 Amanecido, right? In which 6480 was the hour, AM meant in the morning, and AM amanecido, which is when you cannot sleep, you're amanecido, right? And I started doing it 12:30 a.m. for 20 minutes for 21 days. I sat down, I turned my camera on, I set a timer for 20 minutes, and I taught people how to draw anything they would say to me. They would give me 3 words, and I would just make a drawing for 20 minutes with them, showing them how to do. I don't know. One
So
day
it was a live audience interaction.
Yes, and there I found my audience again. And that would keep me busy because I would go to sleep at 2 a.m. wake up early to edit the video, to post it next day so that it would promote the next one. And people were really engaging.
And so what was also interesting about you is you at least were with your wife. It was the two of you locked down. I can't tell you how many people in the city, this country, the world were locking down alone for that year, 2 years, and so on. But at least you were with your wife, who's also a performing artist like you. And the silver lining that I want to hear from all of you, because why am I, you know, an executive producer also on this and a co-producer? Why do I stand by this? Because you all inspired me. You know, if this was going to be like this drag negative show that, oh, how horrible our lives were, but that you all gave it some sort of a twist, and basically not only to inspire us during the pandemic that is still going on and not finished, but that I think you inspired us in life. Like, what do you do when, for lack of a better term, the shit hits the fan and the world closes? So you and your wife, out of that, you developed, you built a studio in your home.
Yeah, this right here, this is a cabin. And I built it myself with PVC. These are like moving blankets. This is my bedroom, and it became my studio. Right behind my screen, there are speakers, another TV. We bought so many instruments. the unemployment money I used to build my home studio. And we just started
Yay.
creating music. I also
That's why we needed it. We needed
Yeah.
that financing.
and I also went to NYU tish.com and found something. It was a course on music industry essentials. So I took that and I learned a lot about the music industry, and that helped me a lot with doing all the music that now we are putting out there all the time, because we have all this that we made and built during the pandemic.
Because you and your wife sing together, make music videos and so
Yeah.
on. So, and I really congratulate you on that, because we like to think there's always a silver lining. Aaron, when in the midst of the pandemic did you begin to see the light? When
Oh, well,
was the silver lining for you? When did you bust out of that dark cloud?
Well, I absolutely relate to what Gilberto was saying about like the you have to create meaning wherever you find it. I feel like that's what artists do in general. Is like no matter how drab shit is, no matter how dismal the world might feel even now, it's like, we create meaning of some sort. Um, and so I spent the first like year of the pandemic really diving into making my own music. I have a solo project called Ani that I produce, I write, I record everything on. So I just went into a deep dive with that of like, all right, everything else is falling apart. Well, what's the thing that I can put my energy into? It's this art that I feel only I could create. Everyone has a thing that only they could create. I'm sure that's how you feel about Prime Latino Media. I'm sure that's how the two of you feel about your art practice. So for me, it was really diving deep into recording my own music, into working on my craft as a horn player, as a songwriter. But then I really hit a wall where I was like, when you're working in isolation, it's like a feedback loop of your own ideas. And so when you're talking about an audience as the meter, it's like not only their meter, they feed you ideas, or other collaborators, they feed you ideas that bring out parts of yourself that you would never even know about. So then after about a year, like starting in March 2021, I started really taking a step back from recorded work and just focusing on live performance. And I was playing with a lot of brass bands, so you don't need amplification, you can play outside. It was actually the busiest that I had ever been as a musician, because it was like there were parties outside.
Yeah.
You needed to be socially distant, but you could have a brass band pull up. So it was like 1 year of intensive self-isolation, recorded work with some virtual collaboration, and then a year of like really intense collaboration for live performance. And now I feel like I'm coming back to center, and it's like I'm starting to find the balance between the two, because I think there's pros and cons of both. You know what I mean? Like, yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful. And Storm, the last word is, as we have an expression that out of everything negative, something positive comes out. What did you learn most about yourself, or what surprised you the most at the end of this period? And where did you bust out and have your silver lining moment, that there is a rainbow at the end of the clouds?
Well, more than anything, that we're stronger than we think we even know. Even when you're at what you feel is the edge, you realize, oh, no, there's a bridge. You're not falling off the cliff. Don't worry. You feel it's wobbly. Balance yourself out. There's people waiting for you on the other side. And that I learned that. Rely on the people that love you, rely on your friends, rely on your allies, rely on people that I didn't realize how loved I was and how appreciated I was as an artist, as a musician, as a human being, until the pandemic hit. I had people that I didn't even know coming out of the woodwork. If you need us, we're here. If you need a platform, we're here. If you need, resources, we're here. You think you're at the edge, at the precipice, about to fall over. You're not going to fall over. Trust me, you're not. And, sadly, I lost my mom during the pandemic. And that's when people really came out and Once I found my footing again, I actually was able to be hired to work outside of New York, working with a great company called Teatro Zinzani. They're based out of Seattle and they reopened in Chicago. And I ended up going to Chicago, which also huge Puerto Rican community was there ready to welcome me. So I was, you know, what I learned the most, sense of resilience in oneself, but also there are people outside of your circle that are seeing you, are looking at you from afar and willing and ready to help.
Well,
Yes.
again, you were featured on this show because you're brilliant artists. It was not serendipity that you landed in it, but that I think what conveys and communicates clearly from this, piggybacking on what Storm raised, is that all three of you are very loved. And that was important, that was inspirational, and that shone right through. So they're in the second episode of From Performers to Spectators, COVID-19 NYC. It's on the PBS channel All Arts. You can also go on allarts.org and you can get the link to see it if you don't have access to the channel. I'm Theo Louis for Prime Latino Media, and I could not be more honored than to be with the three of you right now, and to be co-executive producer on this and co-producer on the program. And I wish you a great post-pandemic career that is lucrative and where people are knocking on your doors as we see who you are. Thank you very much. Until the next time. Thank you. Gracias.